This is Hunter Muse
And this is Chris Snipes, and you are listening.
to The Melt.
Well, very briefly, though, just in case somebody is just now coming upon you, maybe just give them a brief background as to who you are, and then we'll dive right into it.
Oh, and this is the book called A New Science of Heaven. Oh, very good. Very good.
Yes.
That we're going to be discussing amongst other things. And so my name is Robert Temple, and I'm a funny sort of chap. Um, I don't know. Some people laugh at me. That's okay. Anyway, I'm a bit of an eclectic, and I jump around and write books about different sorts of things. And so this one called The New Science of Heaven is particularly important because I'm taking information from all kinds of sources on the very frontiers of modern science, which most modern scientists don't even know about, and putting it all together in a popular book. Well, I know it's dense, it's full of information, but it is readable by somebody who you don't, there's not a single equation in the book, don't worry. And, no math, and you don't have to know any science. I mean, it helps if you've heard of the Earth and the Moon, and that's about all you need to know. And I've done the recorded one, the audible
Mhm.
uh, one that you, Chris, have listened to yourself, and that's a 12-hour ordeal. I'm
Oh,
amazed
I loved it.
you're still
I,
healthy.
I'm better for it, actually. I could have taken a trilogy of those books easily.
Oh,
Yeah.
don't give me ideas.
I'm very much giving you ideas. So let's get into the basics of what is plasma? How are you defining plasma in this world?
Well, so the main thing about all of this subject is that the universe is not made of atoms. Whatever you were told at school is wrong. Um, of course, those teachers were earnest. They didn't know they weren't telling you the truth. They thought they were. But the universe is 99.99% plasma. And I'll just say in a moment what that is. But it's not made of atoms. What is made of atoms is the earth and our bodies and physical matter, which is also technically atomic matter because it's made of atoms. So now that's just planets and solid bodies, which are very rare in the universe, um, which are made of atoms. Everything else is made of plasma, like the sun is completely made of plasma. It's not made of any atoms. And all stars are completely made of plasma. So that's just for a starter or a starer. And so what is plasma? Plasma is another form of matter. It is matter, but it's not atomic matter.
Mhm.
It's made of particles. Now, the thing about atoms is they have a balanced charge. They've got like positive stuff in the middle and negative stuff, that's electrons around them as like in shell layers. And that balances. So they're not charged. They're neutral.
Mhm.
And those neutral things are called atoms, and that's what builds physical matter, as we call it. But most particles are not in such configurations. Everything's unbalanced. It's positive and negative charge is unequal everywhere. And so plasma is made of electrons, which are the negatively charged things.
Hmm.
And when they run around, that's called electricity. And then the positively charged things, there's two kinds. There's the protons, which are larger and clunkier than the electrons. They don't run around nearly as fast, but they're positively charged. And then there's the ions. Now, a conventional physicist who's been brought up in the traditional way would say that an ion is an incomplete atom because it's sort of almost an atom, but not quite. Normally, it would just be lacking some electrons so that it's effectively positively charged. You could say it's a positively charged, incomplete atom. That's the conventional way of looking at it. But I turn everything on its head and I say, well, ions are what's normal, and it's very abnormal to occasionally have a balanced ion become a thing called an atom. That's just, if you have to stand on your head to understand the way things have changed, it won't hurt you. Although I wouldn't recommend doing it for too long because too much blood rushing to your head is not a good idea either.
Wise.
So you ration yourselves.
Yes.
Now, when we started talking, I saw you, Hunter, in the background standing on your head. And, oh no, I'm just teasing.
Metaphorically.
So that's what plasma is. You see, now you may say, well, so okay, so it's plasma. So an electricity is a form of plasma. The flow of positive currents was named proticity by my great friend Peter Mitchell, who proved that proticity was all in every cell of the body. He got the Nobel Prize for chemistry in 1978. And he even built a protic motor, a motor that ran on proton currents instead of electric currents, just to
Mm.
prove that it would work, and it did. Unfortunately, I think it was thrown out by his children after he died. I haven't been
Oh,
able to trace any of his library or anything.
that's horrible.
Oh, don't get me started. But anyway, so the only protic motor in the world is probably no longer in existence, but it did work. And he came up with the term proticity because there was no word for the flow of positive current
Mhm.
of protons. And so he said, well, we'll call it proticity, and electrons have electricity. That makes sense. And so I use that word in my book, but I explain it first.
Mhm.
So you've got those currents now. The sun emits what's called the solar wind. I think most people know that now. It was greatly resisted by scientists until 1962 when the American satellites went up and detected it. Because until then, outer space was supposed to be completely empty, a total vacuum with nothing.
Mhm.
That's, of course, untrue. It couldn't be less true. It's filled with solar wind, which is mostly positively charged, but there are threads known as filaments of electricity running through it, streaking through it as well. So it's all very active out there. Outer space is full of stuff. It's just spread far apart.
Mhm.
And and the universe is like that. You know, all those. You've probably seen photographs of the universe that looks a bit like a spider's web or something, with filaments and connected with blobs, which you could call nodes, and
Mhm.
the filaments are, connect them with each other. Well, those filaments are um, what's called Birkeland currents, which are full of electricity going between the stars and between the galaxies and so on. And some of them might be like several light years wide. These are gigantic filaments. And so those threads that you see in the astronomical photographs, those are filaments
Mhm.
full of electricity running along, huge currents. And they travel near the speed of light, what's called relativistic speeds, and by superconductivity, which means there's no resistance to them. Superconductivity of electric current is what happens when the electricity is flowing without resistance, nothing stopping it. No, it doesn't generate any heat. And it can basically go on forever, and it's like a kind of perpetual motion machine thing.
Hmm.
It would just go on and on, never stop, because there's no reason to stop because there's no resistance. As long as it keeps being coming from somewhere, being generated. And so the universe is full of these electric currents, and this is known as the electric universe theory, to which I subscribe. And the it's this is very much connected with what my book is about.
Hmm.
My book isn't about the electric universe theory, but it incorporates it and substantiates it. And I have addressed an electric universe conference on one occasion, and I knew those people. Val Thornhill, who has died, was a marvelous man, and Don Scott, who was the great genius. But I won't go into the history of all of that. It gets a bit of a side discussion. But it's important to know that all these electric currents are charging around the universe in these filaments that you can see in the photographs that look like threads.
Hmm.
And the blobs are either stars or bunches of stars, which are emitting positive charge, or they are enormous dusty plasma clouds. So the nebulae, like the Horse's Head Nebula and the
Hmm.
Crab Nebula and all those nebulae,
Mhm.
those are dusty plasma clouds, which are in the glow mode so that you can see them. See, um, when plasma is there, it has three modes. It can be the dark mode where it's invisible, it's not emitting any light at all. The glow mode where it's actually what it says, glowing, or the arc mode where it's blazing. And that's what you get with stars. And our sun is in the arc mode, it's blazing.
Hmm.
Now, the solar system that we're living in uh, is it goes way beyond the last planet, way beyond Pluto, no, way, way, way beyond the Oort belt and all those things that are way out there to finally the limit. And we've now had a couple of satellites go beyond the edge of the solar system, which took years and years and years, as you know. And they've sent back signals which show that the interstellar medium is denser than the interplanetary medium.
Hmm.
So the whole galaxy is full of stuff, and
Hmm.
that stuff is plasma and dust. Now, the dust takes two basic forms. There's the spherical dust and the ones shaped like rice grains, dust grains, they're called. And they spin. And when they spin, they generate power. And I'll come back to that because that's very important because they generate energy by spinning, which they do because there's force applied to them in the form of the wind.
Hmm.
And so um, everything in the universe is like that. Now, so are our bodies. We are absolutely filled with plasma. Peter Mitchell proved that there was plasma flow continually, all day, every day, across every membrane of every cell and every mitochondrion in our bodies. That's just for starters. And that now plasma fills all of us, and we have a plasma self, which is actually larger than our physical body. It sticks apparently out about that much.
Hmm.
And very sensitive people who are rare people known as sensitives claim that they can see the aura around the head. Well,
Mhm.
it's because they can see the plasma body extending beyond the skull, you see. And so we're completely filled with electricity and proticity and other states of plasma. Now, plasma is matter, and it was discovered in 1879 by Sir William Crookes in the UK, who 4 years before had invented the vacuum tube. So he created the electronic era. He was messing around with his vacuum tubes, which you would do if you had invented them, wouldn't you? And so she said, "There's something going on in my vacuum tube. I don't know quite what that is." And he studied it and studied it, studied it. And then he finally published about it. He said, "Well, this stuff that's going on in my vacuum tube, that's matter, but it's a completely new form of matter." He said it's the fourth stage of matter, the others being solid, liquid, and gaseous. That's the
Hmm.
It's the fourth stage of matter. Well, we know it's much more than that now. It was in 1928 that it was given the name of plasma by a guy who thought that would be cool.
Yeah. Sounds
And
cool.
it's no connection with blood plasma, which
Yeah.
is another use of the word. So nurses and doctors, they think plasma means blood stuff, but it's not that. So physics plasma, you see. And so this plasma can exist in gaseous form, in liquid form, in solid form, and in crystalline form. So there are plasma crystals that's highly ordered and highly structured, rigorously crystalline blobs of plasma. Now, a blob of plasma is called a plasmoid, just as lots of politicians are humanoids.
Big, vaguely human figures. Yes,
And I don't want to run them down.
I do.
Yeah. Well, anyway, if only they were more like plasmoids. But uh, so the plasmoids hold together because they're surrounded by a kind of skin, just as we have skin, underneath my clothes. I'm not going to show you, but I do have skin. And so these are called sheaths. Now, the thing about them is they're double layered. It's known as a bilayer thing.
Mhm.
So you've got like the positive charge on the inside of the layer and the negative charge on the outside of the layer. And this surrounds the plasmoid and keeps it intact. And it protects it brilliantly. You can blast it with energy and blow it around, and try and hit it with a hammer, but you won't get through the sheath. And mind you, these are can be microscopic or at nanometer dimensions, but they can also be the size of a nebula in space.
Mhm.
That's a plasmoid in a sense. And our solar system is a plasmoid, at the center of which is this arc form of plasma called the sun, which is generating all the stuff now that comes out, which is the solar wind. And so the fact that plasma exists in all these different states and can be sealed up in these plasmoids means that you can have fantastically complicated structures, internal structure of a plasmoid. So you can have a plasmoid sitting next to that's full of immensely hot stuff, sitting next to a plasmoid that's full of immensely cold stuff, and they can't get through to each other and affect each other, so that they remain hot and cold, and they don't come to a sort of medium in between them. They're isolated. And these tend to be joined together by filaments in vast networks of plasma entities, um, and the universe being the largest plasma entity, which is full of filaments and blobs. And that's its structure. And it's the same as the structure of the human brain. In my book, I publish side by side um, a picture of what the human brain is like with all the networks of the currents and the cells and all and the different filaments and things that are in the brain and side by side with a photograph of what the universal web looks like, and they're the same. So this is an example of fractality. Everything is as above, so below.
Mhm.
We are at a smaller scale than the universe. I would say considerably smaller. But there's a lot that's a lot smaller than us. And so things go on um, at the nanometer scale, which is 1 millionth of a no, it's 1 billionth of a meter, and even at 1/10 of that, the quantum computing that's going on now, they use Josephson junctions where current leaps across a barrier, and chips and so on, which are nanometer sized or smaller. They're working at 1/10 of a nanometer, and a nanometer is 1 billionth of a meter. Just imagine how small.
Mm.
And they can do this now, and they can handle current 1 electron at a time. You see, you don't learn much in the press or the media or anything like that about what's really going on in quantum computing because it's all so secret for corporate secrecy. So if you're running a company that's trying to make the fastest chip, you're not going to tell how you're doing it because the guy down the block will say, "Oh, so that's how you're doing it. Well, I'll have a go at that too." Everything's corporate secrecy because there's such big money involved. And in addition to all the corporate secrecy, which we can all understand perfectly well, and we can't really object to it because you have to if you're going to run a business. In addition to that is the even tighter and I would say distinctly paranoid secrecy of the security agencies and those kind of people and the military and so on. And because you see, they're interested in weapons
Hmm. Yeah.
and how can we blow up the world quicker than the next guy.
Mm.
And so for them, it's what they call national security. All they have to do is mention the two magic words national security. It's like saying abracadabra, and
Exactly.
everybody falls down on their knees and worships them because they don't even have to demonstrate or prove anything or account to anybody for this. They just and they everybody knows that all those agencies overclassify everything manically. They do a lot of scientific research, much of which has no need whatsoever to be secret, but to them to release any information is so much against their character and their training. It's like trying to get a terribly, terribly introverted Scrooge to give you money for a charity. He's not going to do that. He's greedy. He wants it all. He wants it all. He wants it all. And so the agencies are like that. They want it all. They don't know what to do with it necessarily. It's like those crazy computers in Utah. They want to record every phone call, every email, anything, everything. They have to have it.
Mhm.
They don't know why they have to have it. They justify it in vague ways. It's national security. We might want to track somebody someday, and you put his name in and click, and you get all the his browsing history, and you can see, oh, he looked at a certain website 3 weeks ago, and they can do that, and that's useful. But this is the justification for trying to know everything about everybody in the entire world, which is, I would say, a bit excessive. Anyway, you can't talk to those people because they know they're right. And if you don't like it, they can always do something about it. In other words, don't mess with me because I don't just have a big stick. So we have to live with the fact that on the one hand, we've got corporate secrecy, which we can't really object to, with the important research that we all need to know, at least in general sense. And on the other hand, this paranoia of the spooks, which is excessive and holding things back, because if they would just release the non-secret stuff, everybody could be getting on with pushing it forward because the spooks themselves are not capable of doing that. It's like an exceedingly rich man who has hundreds of millions and he won't spend any of it and he uses 40-watt light bulbs to save on the electricity bill. I mean, why?
Yeah.
Why? Because it's a mania, you see. Anyway, that's my speech on that subject.
Well, really quickly, Robert, weren't you kept from publishing something by an alphabet agency? What's the story behind that?
Well, the first thing is they got extremely upset about my first book, The Serious Mystery.
Mhm.
And I was, it came out in 1976 in its original form, and greatly updated in 1998. But in 76, it came out, and it was positively reviewed in Nature, and everybody received it and loved it for about a year. In 1977, the agencies got their act together. They decided they didn't want a loose cannon like me talking about extraterrestrial life because they couldn't control me, and there's no use even trying, you know. And so anybody who's out there who's a loose cannon, everybody's a loose cannon who doesn't work for them and sign all the agreements. Everybody else is a loose cannon. I'm sure you're both loose cannons. You better watch it.
You better believe it.
Well, so then they started a highly organized character assassination campaign against me using a group called SICOP, SICOP. And Carl Sagan and Isaac Asimov were the most prominent members of that. Now, I'll tell you about Asimov. The first time I spoke to him, you know, he read my book, and I spoke to him on the phone, and for about an hour about it, and he said he loved it, and he couldn't find anything wrong with it, and it was so exciting, and all of that. A few weeks later, he changed his tune. He became one of my most uh, dangerous critics, constantly attacking me because he'd been given these orders, you see.
Mhm.
This group was organized in order to attack people. Sagan was absolutely relentless, and I published an account of his terrible techniques. I mean, Sagan, he wrote all this false stuff about my material, complete complete lies, saying that I'd said this and said that and said that and said that, none of which I'd said, of course. And on the basis of these straw dogs which he set up, which were fantasy, he then knocked them over and attacked me, and then he's, you know, this was ruthless, and it went on for decades. I mean, decades. It got so bad, and this is before the other book that I'm about to tell you about. Um, I I was doing a series of training, scientific and technological training videos with a company run by a man I knew, and we were going to do a series of 40, and we did one, which was about. I was quite proud of it. I wrote a film about the afterburners on F-18 fighter jets.
Very specialized.
Everyone does. Anyway, they got very upset that Robert Temple was doing anything like that and letting Temple near an F-18. No way. So
Strange.
they went to the guy and they said, you can't work with Robert Temple. He said, what do you mean? He and I have an agreement. We're doing 40 films together, and we just finished the first one. Yes, we know about that one. And they said, you better listen to us. And he said, well, I'm not going to break my agreement with Robert because he and I were friends after all. And and this went on for weeks. And the two CIA men, as he called them, they identified themselves as CIA men. And this is England, right?
Mhm.
And they kept turning up at his door and phoning him and going to see him every day for weeks. And if you don't drop Robert Temple, we will destroy your business and you will be penniless. These are the kind of threats they make. So and you can't tell him and so on. So anyway, he phoned me up one day and I said, "Oh, hello. When are we starting the next one?" He said, Robert, I have something terrible to tell you. You're not going to like it." "Oh, what's that?" He said, "I'm afraid I can't go on working with you." "Can't go on working with me? Why? Have I got bad breath?" No, you don't understand. This is really serious, Robert. I can't. literally can't go on working with you. I said, why? He said, because I've been visited every day for weeks by two CIA men who have threatened to destroy my business and my life if I don't detach myself from you. He said, I feel terrible about this. And of course, I'm not supposed to tell you. They ordered me never to tell you because when they go and work over people, they're sworn to secrecy, and most of them keep that. Although many people who've been approached in that way about me did tell me. And he said, I'm sorry. I know we have an agreement. Well, you got to try and understand. I can't let my life be destroyed just because I like you and we're doing good things together. I have to break off with you. I can't see you again, and we can't work together. And I can't tell you how sorry I am. Well, I didn't. I knew that there was no way that he did this on his own initiative, and there's no point in my trying to enforce my agreement or anything. It will only make more trouble. So I said, well, okay. But that's just one example of
Mhm.
how they work. And they are very ruthless people.
Yeah.
They'll do anything, and they don't care because they have no moral compass, you see,
Mhm.
and they've been trained to lie from the day they joined the agency. I know this because my best friend from school joined the CIA because his father was a great patriot and he was very patriotic and he thought he'd join the CIA because his father wanted him to. I knew the father as well, very nice man. And so he joined the CIA. And he told me all about it. He said I couldn't stand it. I couldn't stand it. He said on the first day they tell you you have to lie about everything to everybody. You can't tell anybody ever that you work for us. You can't tell your wife when you get one. You can't tell your parents. You can't tell your siblings. You can't tell your best friend. You cannot ever tell anyone or else. That's day one. That's the beginning. That's just the start. So he started off taking files, top secret files between the offices, on a sort of push cart thing, to get him, familiar, I don't know, with where everything was and who everybody was. This is how they start you out sometimes, apparently. He was given an office in the State Department with his name on the door, and he had to tell everybody he worked for the State Department. And he had to go there once a week. It was an empty room with a desk, a chair, and a phone, nothing else. And he had to go and sit in there for a while and then leave and be seen going in and out of the State Department building at least once a week
Mhm.
in order to keep his cover. And he had to tell everybody he worked for them. And if they said, what do you do at the State Department? He had some story that he was supposed to say, whatever it was. And he said that he couldn't, because he was a very open person. The idea of concealing anything or lying to anybody was just alien to his nature. And he realized that he had to resign. Now, they don't like people to leave them.
Yeah.
And so he managed to get a job working for the Washington, D.C. police force and rose to sergeant, but he was blocked from ever being promoted above that. And he was very good at that because he had been an MP in the army before, so he knew about that sort of thing.
Yes.
And he was a very good policeman, and he used to take me around in his patrol car. It was great fun. And I'd met all his police buddies and everything, and he married a police woman.
Hmm.
It's quite interesting getting to know that world that you normally just see on television,
Exactly. I can imagine.
to meet real ones.
Uh-huh.
And he is still very cheerful and jolly and joking and laughing all the time, but it was pretty depressing for him. So I know from my best friend telling me what it's like to join one of the agencies and how suffocating it is, and that you can't escape. You have to get out as quick as you can until it's too late. Because if you actually know top secret stuff, then they just kill you.
Yes.
And they really do.
Hmm.
So he got out before he knew top secret stuff. And they knew he was genuine. I mean, he wasn't going to be a threat to security. He is so transparent. And they knew the reason why he wanted to get out is he couldn't stand it. They knew that perfectly well, which is the only reason he remained alive, I guess. But that's his story. And I mention that because these people will do anything. So then in 1989, I published the book that you're referring to. It's called Open to Suggestion. It was published in UK and sold out very quickly and was reprinted and that sold out very quickly. And it made a big impact here at the time. And so my literary agent wanted to sell it to an American publisher, which is the usual thing that you do. And uh, she sent it round to different ones, and and it went to eight different publishers, all of whom were interested in publishing it, but they all rejected it, and they sent letters, which I've got somewhere, saying we were forced to reject this book because we were visited by two CIA men, always the same two CIA men. And how did they know it was going from company to company to company to company? How do they monitor that? The activities of the agents. You know, they know when you're saying offering it to one publisher instead of another, and so they would go around and say, "You can't publish this. If you do, we will damage your business." To big publishers, these are huge publishers we're talking about, were threatened. Now, what was this book? It was about hypnosis, which I studied for 15 years, and I went to the international conferences and things, and I knew all the world's leading hypnosis researchers on a first name basis, and they'd given me uh, advanced uh, copies of their unpublished papers, and they all knew I was writing a book about this, and they were thrilled that somebody was who really understood what they were doing was doing this, going to write a really good comprehensive book about their work, which I did because, and part of the book was 150 years of case histories. And I described the work of all these wonderful researchers and praised them, and which they well deserved. But I included in the book, as I needed to do, um, a couple of chapters about mind control and crowd psychology and that kind of thing. Um, and the mind control was only just coming out. People had heard about MK Ultra
Mm-hmm.
just, and a few files had come out. People didn't really know the details, and I mentioned that. And I said there's obviously been a big mind control program of the agencies, um, and it seems to have been called MK Ultra, and there was another name, Artichoke, and
Mm-hmm.
one, I think Bluebird. I mentioned these in passing. I didn't know what they were or any detail. And I think but I did explain the criminal abuses of hypnosis, which are possible, and how you train an assassin. Um, because I gave 150 years of case histories of the criminal abuses of the subject, which where countless people had been hypnotized who are high susceptibles to go and rob banks or to
Mm-hmm.
carry out assassinations. And even there were government funded experiments whereby hypnotists ordered subjects to have heart attacks, and they did. And they published it. I mean, these are people that are ordering you to have a heart attack that could be fatal,
Yeah.
and they're boasting about it in their article about how they can order you to have a heart attack. They
Mm-hmm.
didn't quite get it that they had almost killed these people, and maybe there were some they did kill who they didn't mention. I don't know. Now, this was all being coordinated by a very sinister man at the University of Pennsylvania called Martin Orne, O-R-N-E.
Mm-hmm.
And his two minders from the CIA were the two guys who went to all the publishers. I knew them. I'd met them at the conferences. They're always there. They didn't say much, and they hadn't done any research themselves, but they're always there because they're always with Martin. And it's because they were the agency man whose job it was to make sure everything's in order and to, see that the conferences are going well and all of that and meet everyone, know who they all are, keep an eye on everybody. And a lot of the hypnotists doing this kind of research were very good people. They weren't sinister at all, but the system was sinister. Now, the head of the uh, International Society was a wonderful man called Jack Hilgard. Um, Jack was his nickname, and he was in his 80s. He had been president of the American Psychological Association. He ran the Stanford Hypnosis Lab, and he was the world's leading hypnosis expert. And he and I became very friendly. In fact, he wrote praising my book, and I put it in the front of the book, which must have really driven the agencies crazy. Because there's Hilgard praising Temple, the guy we're trying to destroy, and his
Mhm.
book must burn. Anyway, Jack Hilgard told me that we, meaning those of us outside of the secrecy agreements, will never be able to get anywhere in hypnosis because more than 50% of the hypnosis experiments carried out in the United States have been carried out by the FBI. Those are his words.
Mm.
And he said he had not been able to persuade them to release any of this, even though a lot of it shouldn't be secret, but they won't release anything. And he said more than half of the work in hypnosis is top secret, and I can't get them to agree to let it out so that the people who aren't doing secret work can read it and study it, and we can get a wider understanding in the field of psychology for the phenomena of hypnosis and divided consciousness and all that sort of thing. Because he
Mhm.
wrote the definitive book on divided consciousness, and the book had to be banned, and it was because 8 publishers were threatened with destruction if they dared to publish it. That's a harmless book, you know. I didn't say that much about MK Ultra. What did I know?
Hmm.
But I described how you do all these things,
Mhm.
and I proved that it's a myth that you can't be made to do something against your principles on hypnosis. That was a myth circulated by the stage hypnotists. Uh,
Hmm.
to get people to come up on stage. I was later able to discover where that came from. Everybody in the field knows it's not true, but they'll never say so publicly. So my book it was about how wonderful hypnosis can be for medical purposes, but also how dangerous it is in the wrong hands. And so that was never published in America or indeed anywhere but the UK. And so that's that story. The book is called Open to Suggestion. It's 550 pages long. It's really full of information. Great pity that it was only read in one country.
Yeah. Is it still in print anywhere?
Oh, no, no, it went out of print almost immediately,
Gotcha.
doubtless under pressure, and was never reprinted. I have the rights back, but
Hmm.
there's nobody who would publish it, I
Gotcha.
expect. I've got other things I'm doing, but you asked about that, so I've given you the story.
Thank you.
And it's shocking, but they do this all the time.
Oh, yeah.
And I wasn't the only person targeted for character assassination. Many alternative writers were, many of whom were friends of mine, and even more were acquaintances of mine who were straying from the trodden path and thinking alternatively in almost any way, uh, targeted. Now, this still goes on, but not quite so intensely with the organized group of the psychop people. Um, now, I'll just say another thing about Sagan. I only met him once, and that was by chance in a restaurant, and we chatted a bit. and with one of his girlfriends. And now Sagan started life as a biologist. He wasn't a physicist at all. And there was a Russian guy who had written a book about extraterrestrial life. The CIA got hold of it and translated it into English and gave it to Sagan because this was the Soviet Union days, you see, and the copyright wasn't recognized. So they said, we're going to you're going to take this book and you're going to write extra chapters and around it and publish it under your name, which he did. That was his first big book, and then he became a superstar because the CIA got their media contacts to pump him up, to make him a big spokesman because he was going to play ball and only say what they wanted him to say,
Mhm.
and meanwhile attack people like me, which he did outrageously. And I've published a full account of what he did, um, which is on my researchgate.net postings. Um, it's a phone. So uh, that's the sad story about the suppression and what we're up against. And you see, these people are paranoids and psychopaths. There's a lot of psychopaths about. I think about 10% of humanity are psychopathic, and the most extreme ones are the ones who want power, so they're the ones who run for office.
Exactly.
They want to control others. Most of us have no desire to control anybody, and so apart from, of course, Chris controlling you, Hunter.
Well, that's clear.
Just the other way around.
It depends on the day.
Anyway, we don't want to control people. So why would we run for office? I mean, this is a lot of work, just to be in control. And who wants to be in control? I don't want to be in control.
No, not me.
Anyway, and I don't want those responsibilities. Not that they think of them as responsibilities. They think of them as opportunities to control because they're obsessed with being in control. And they don't have any empathy, these people. They have no real emotions. And I don't want to mention names of any individuals, but I think all your favorite hate figures fill in the blanks. And why have they got dead eyes? And why do they not seem to care? And who are these people who constitute the self-appointed elites who don't care about the ordinary people, the people known as the public, who have contempt for them? Contempt for the public. They really, literally, absolutely don't care if you live or die.
Mhm.
And because it means nothing to them as long as they're powerful. And they're all crazy. You have to understand that they're all crazy.
Oh yeah.
And you can't have a rational conversation with such a person. You can't reason with them because they're beyond reason. And they are in control of all sorts of things, sometimes countries, sometimes institutions, sometimes universities. Whatever you care to name, they're heading for the top of an organization of some kind. It's a kind of mass infiltration by the psychopaths.
Mhm.
I don't know that it's necessarily planned, although there are coordinated efforts, of course, of coordinated infiltration. But by and large, it's a kind of instinct of all the psychopaths to do this. So they don't even need to be told. They'll do it anyway.
Yep.
They'll spontaneously seek to rise to the top and to control everything and everyone. It's mental illness, but there's too many of them. So that's my speech on that. Let's go back to plasma.
Yes. Let's. Did you know where you left off, or do you want me to prompt you with another question?
I didn't leave off.
Everything is connected, of course.
Chris, give me a question. Go on.
Well, let's an interesting turn in this book. There are many, many interesting turns, but it has to do with something that happened in October of 2019, a discovery that was made about some clouds.
Oh, you want me to talk about the Kordylewski
Yeah.
Cloud?
Oh, yes. Please.
As they say in America, you betcha. One word.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
So, so, yes, absolutely. Well, I'm on ResearchGate, and somehow or other, I occasionally browse a bit, and I don't can't remember how this happened, but I discovered a paper on ResearchGate, which is a website for technical papers, um, and from some Hungarian astronomers, observational astronomers. They actually use real telescopes
Mhm.
and look at things through them. And they published a paper about the Kordylewski clouds. Now, what are the Kordylewski clouds? In 1961, a Polish guy called Casimir Kordylewski discovered these two clouds in space between the Earth and the Moon, but not in a direct line of sight. They're off 60 degrees off either side, um, that were almost transparent, but he managed to see them slightly. They're they don't emit any light,
Mhm.
and they're huge. And he said he discovered these clouds, and they're named after him. They called the Kordylewski Clouds. Well, a lot of people tried to, or pretended to try to confirm them and failed. But in 2019, as Hungarians decided to have a look, and they confirmed it on beyond question that they really did exist. Now, these clouds are emit no light and they're almost entirely transparent, but they are there's two of them, and together they are 18 times the size of the Earth, so 9 times the size of the Earth each. And so what this means is that whatever they are, and I'll come to that, we are not in an Earth-Moon system. We are in a two-cloud system, which has an Earth and a Moon thrown in. We're the extras in this drama.
So it wouldn't
Um,
be a solar system. It would be some
This
other
is
kind of system.
these are between us and the moon.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
So it's not even the solar system. This is just the Earth and the moon with these clouds, but it's really the clouds and the Earth and the moon are there as extras. It's as if it was by design, and I wouldn't rule out that it is by design. That's a big issue, one that we can barely contemplate. And so, what are they? So I immediately realized that clouds of that size must be vast, dusty plasma clouds. So I contacted the Hungarians through the messaging system of ResearchGate.
Mhm.
It was a woman who was in charge, and I said, "Are you considering the plasma aspects of the clouds?" I congratulated her first on this wonderful achievement, of course, of proving the existence of these clouds. And because you see, I was in touch also with Kordylewski's great grandson, who said that his father had told him that Kordylewski had been ordered by the Polish government to stop investigating these clouds, so he was never able to complete his work, which is why it didn't go further. They would have put him in jail or sent him to Siberia or whatever, because this is the Soviet era,
Mhm.
Mhm.
and uh, and so I got a reply from the Hungarian woman saying. No, we are only examining um, the the um, the dynamics of the clouds. She didn't appear to know what I meant by the plasma aspects. I don't think she knew that much about plasma or anything about plasma, perhaps. And the idea that these clouds would be plasmas hadn't crossed her mind. So when I realized that this was not being followed up, I phoned up my very close friend, Professor Chandra Vikramasinghe. That's a long name. It comes from Sri Lanka, and that's what names are like there. And he was a retired professor of astrophysics and was the leading protege of Sir Fred Hoyle, and whom I knew also. And so I said, Chandra, look, can we do a joint paper? Because I've done many joint papers with him on other subjects, such as the spread of the COVID virus on wind systems across the continents and that kind of thing. And yeah, I would do more about the atmosphere. And so, and there were joint authors who were actually virologists, who knew that side of things. So I said, can we do a joint paper? Because they found these two clouds. He hadn't heard of them because they don't seem to realize that these are dusty plasma clouds, and that's really important, as I'll explain in a moment. So I said, sure, let's do it. And we did this joint paper for Advances in Astrophysics, which is one of the journals. And that is reprinted at the end of my book as an appendix. And it's also on ResearchGate. And it's had 7,000 people download it from ResearchGate. And it's a technical paper. So that shows that the message is getting through. Anyway, we wrote this and published it quickly in order to do two things: to establish our priority, which is what you do when you have an idea, you put it into print so that you can prove that you had thought of it. I mean, that's an automatic thing to do. But the main purpose was not to establish priority in anything, but to get the information out there and let people know this huge discovery having importance from the point of view of plasma. So you've got two gigantic plasma clouds. Together, they're 18 times the size of our planet. What does this mean? Well, as you know, Chris, because you've gone through the whole of my book very carefully, you have to know about plasma to know what it means. And so a large part of my book is explaining all the amazing things about plasma that you really need to know, therefore, what it means to have these two giant clouds just beyond our atmosphere, as it were. And so, and our own ionosphere around the Earth, by the way, is also made completely of plasma, as is the magnetosphere. That is, the Van Allen belts are made completely of plasma. Everything's plasma. It's just that they don't tell you that at school.
Mm-hmm.
And they certainly don't tell you that in the papers or on telly or anything, because there aren't any decent science writers left. I used to be one.
Mm-hmm.
I used to write every week for the science page of the Sunday Times in London. It's great fun because if there's a new thing came along, I would write about it and get lots of, thousands of people would write into the paper about it, and it was getting science out there. And for 6 years, I was a science reporter for Time Life. Also, this is when I was young, and that was interesting. And I wrote for New Scientist. I was doing a lot of science popularization because I believe in it. And so I've written this book, A New Science of Heaven, for it to be able to be read by any um, basically educated person who knows a couple of things, to read if they're prepared to concentrate and stick with it, because it is full of information on every page. And if you've got a sort of 5-second attention span, well, you're not going to get anywhere. But if you're one of those rare people, and there are a few left alive, who can concentrate for more than a 30-second TikTok or something, then and you can read the book because it's not difficult. It's just that it's challenging,
Mm-hmm.
which is different. In other words, you can understand it because I've explained everything. And if I'm talking about all electrons, I tell you what they are. And if I'm talking about superconductivity, I tell you what it is. And so and I just describe it at very great length, step by step by step by step by step, what is important about plasma clouds, because The universe itself is one, and our galaxy is one, and our solar system is one, and they're everywhere. And what I discovered was that the plasma physicists who are working on the absolute frontiers of plasma physics had not only discovered but proved that what's called a dusty complex plasma, it has to have dust in it or it doesn't work. And that whole dust thing is a separate discussion, can self-organize. And they did this in the lab with small plasmoids that were dusty complex plasmoids in the lab, which they created. And they watched them self-organize and even develop intelligent behavior spontaneously, not with any direction. This is called emergence by some people.
Like
And
sentience,
what?
like sentience to that level, or
Absolutely.
okay.
Absolutely. Yes, yes, sentience.
Mhm.
We don't know to what extent. I mean, the little ones in the labs probably are not exactly high IQ, maybe low. It's a kind of AI type of intelligence.
Mhm.
So it wouldn't be what we would think of, laden with emotions as we are,
Sure.
love and hate, and they don't know what pain is because have they ever felt it? No. And they don't know what hunger and thirst are because they don't eat or drink. Uh, the plasma clouds themselves feed on particles coming in from the solar wind. That's their energy source. So they eat particles in space in the way that whales eat plankton. So the largest creatures on Earth eat the smallest creatures on Earth,
Yeah.
plankton.
Mhm.
And so I call the particles that are in the solar wind space plankton,
Mhm.
which are eaten by the plasma entities in our solar system. They eat that stuff, see? They must taste good. It's got a zing to it because it's electrically charged.
Mhm.
Anyway, that's where their energy source comes from. So, which they have to have. And so these clouds are so gigantic that they would have a trillion um, switches and sort of quantum units in them for processing information. They would be gigantic supercomputers of gargantuan size. I mean, together 18 times the size of our planet, two computers working together. Uh, these are computers? I mean, it kind of makes Utah look silly.
Yeah, exactly.
So the alphabet agencies think they've got all the information in Utah? Ha ha ha. Try becoming a Kordylewski cloud if they even want to get laughed at. And the other thing is that the sun is bound to be a gigantic computer because it's made entirely of plasma and it's fantastically complex in structure as even standard scientists admit, even though they don't know what it means. To show you how wrong people can be about the sun, it's meant to have, in the 1920s, Sir Arthur Eddington, who was a very good scientist, came up with a theory, because he couldn't think of another one at the time, as to where the energy of the sun comes from. Where's it all coming from, all this energy? You keep spewing out all that light and everything. And he said there must be some fusion reaction going on in the sun where hydrogen is being turned into helium. In other words, an H bomb in the center of the sun. But of course, if you look into the matter, if there were an H bomb in the sun's so huge that it would take 200,000 years for the energy generated at the center to rise to the surface by convection. That's kind of slow.
Yes.
And and it doesn't emit enough neutrinos. That's called the neutrino problem. But I have a whole chapter, as you know, in my book called The Cold Sun, because the closer you get to the sun, the colder it gets, not the hotter it gets. That's not normal for a stove because The corona is at millions of degrees and it surrounds the sun at a great distance as a kind of halo. But then you pass through the chromosphere, which is much, much cooler, and you get down to what we call the surface of the sun, which is the technical name of which is photosphere. And that's the sort of bubbly, angry looking bit, that's got
Mm.
and it looks kind of dangerous. And it's not solid. I mean, you couldn't stand on it if you were immune to the heat. But it's only 5,500 degrees Celsius. The surface of the sun, the corona is millions of degrees, and you get closer to the sun, and it's only three times the temperature of a cement kiln. What? The surface of the sun? Ooh. So what's going? And then by remote detection, they've worked out these solar scientists what they call heliophysics. That if you go down into the holes known as um, the holes in the sun, sunspots,
Mhm.
the temperature plunges to 3,900 degrees Celsius. So it gets colder as you go into the interior of the sun from the so-called surface, which is the photosphere, which isn't a real surface, but we call it a surface. And so that's why I have a chapter called The Cold Sun. How can you get colder as you go into the sun if it's really got an H bomb in the middle? It's impossible. So what this means is that the conventional theory of the sun's energy generation is wrong. It's just not true. There is no H bomb going off in the center of the sun. There's something else happening. It's not that. And then this is where the electric universe theory comes in very handily, because the I can't really give you a history of the electric universe theory. A lot of that's in my book. The electric current of electrons pours in filaments into the north pole of the sun at the top, and it goes into the sun and pushes out the protons and ions to make the solar wind. In other words, the negative charge comes in and pushes out the positive charge, and it makes the solar wind. And it's continuously coming from another star or the galactic web or whatever. It's coming in continuously. This is how the energy works with the stars. They all have these filaments of electricity feeding them with energy in this huge cosmic web that you see in the photos. What they do is they then push out the solar winds, and they make the other clouds like the Kordylewski clouds are just the two near us, and a lot of the larger planets are to a large extent made of plasma. We don't know to what extent yet. Uh, the big gaseous ones, so-called, it would be plasma gas, a lot of it full of dust. And as is well known, the rings of Saturn are made of dust, plasma dust. And the thing is that nobody had put this story together until I came along and decided I had to do it. People have to know the big picture. There's no use knowing details like individual scientists do, because they don't have time to speak to each other, and they don't know what the guy in the office down the hall is doing, because they're doing their thing, and they're focused inward, and they're not communicators. They're investigators. That's different.
Mhm.
And so they're gathering the information, but they're not spreading it out to the public, because that's not their job. And if they tried to do that, they'd have jealous colleagues going for their jobs and all that. And they don't want to get out of line because they'll lose their positions and their livelihoods. They get canceled. You can be canceled these days for brushing up against a woman in the corridor. She said you've assaulted her. Well, if you can be canceled for that, you can certainly be canceled for saying that the sun is a living creature. That's
Exactly.
where
Yes.
that's a solar assault. So, so I had to gather all this together from countless sources. I'm in my study, and there are mountains and mountains and mountains of physics books. I don't know. I don't have enough shelves. I have so many books you can't imagine.
I we can relate. You
Uh,
can see our overflowing shelves in the back here.
well, that's good. I always trust a person with overflowing shelves. Kind of integrity. But I had to read all this stuff. Fortunately, I'm good at doing that. When I wrote my history of Chinese science and technology for 3,000 years, I had to read and remember 12 million words without making notes, because if I'd made notes, I'd still be working on it now. There's no time for notes. You have to remember it all. And I did that with Joseph Needham. That's a book called The Genius of China. It tells the whole story of 3,000 years of science, invention, and discovery in China. They actually invented and discovered more than half of the ingredients that made the modern world. So I'm always trying to explain to people that the modern world is a joint creation of East and West. A lot of people in the West are nervous of that. Of course, the Chinese are very proud. Um, I became a professor at their top university in Beijing called Tsinghua. Just a visiting one, I mean. I've been appointed a professor twice, but only as a visiting one. I've never been on a staff living on a campus.
Mhm.
Couldn't stand that. But the thing is that the Chinese, I know this is the wrong time to be saying it with all the international political tensions that are going on, but the Chinese are very thrilled with my book, and I spent a lot of time out there, and I many years ago I knew a lot of very important people in China, um, and it's a great pity to me that things have turned out the way they have, put it like that, without apportioning any kind of blame to anybody or naming anybody or being in any way specific. We have to admit that there are tensions. You can call them tensions. And of course, that's a great pity from my point of view, because what I would like to see is the East and the West getting on with each other. But anyway, we mustn't in any way become political. And I never comment on Chinese politics, either here or in China, because I have to be completely separate from anything like that. But um, because of my ex ability to write that book, which I don't think anybody else could have done, and my ability to uh, bring gigantic quantities, I mean millions and millions of words, of very detailed technical information together coherently, which happens to be, I would say, my only skill. I was able to write this book. When I first started writing, I wasn't a natural writer, and it was quite awkward. But over the years, and especially writing for newspapers and magazines, I learned the facility of writing, which I wasn't born with. So I think I can write pretty well now, largely due to that journalistic training, which is terribly good. I'll give you an example quickly. I would I would do a 500-page article for the Sunday Times, and I'd go around to the office, and this would be on a Saturday um, evening or late afternoon, and they would say, "Oh, this is great, Robert. Love this, but you'll have to cut it down to 150 words to squeeze into the page." I would say, "But it's 500 words." Yeah, yeah, we know that, but you had got to cut it down to 150. I said, "Well, how can I cut it down to 150 until it's still you can do it, Robert. Go and do it. Um, when do you have to have it? You have 17 minutes. And do you know I was able to do it?
Wow.
When they put you in that position in journalism, you surprise yourself. You can actually do what you are convinced would be impossible, but you can do it. And or at least I could, and I think a lot of journalists can, because that's the training, you see. that was incredibly useful to me. A lot of distinguished authors had early training in journalism, like Hemingway, for instance. And and so it is useful. I only did science and business journalism. I never wrote politics.
Mhm.
So that's how I came to write this by bringing all this information together from all these really weird sources, like what the Russian scientists were doing. And I had to get unbelievably obscure journals and there's a huge amount of work over years to gather it all together. And then you have to understand it. Ugh. That's the worst part. Getting the stuff together is one thing, but
Yes.
being able to understand what you're reading,
Yeah.
very heavily mathematical. And I would often have to read around the really complex equations because, when they start doing partial differential equations that are 6 pages long, I say, okay, sorry, that's not me. I skip to the seventh page and resume the text, and I can deal with simple equations, but I'm not a mathematician, you see, and and I don't think mathematics is correctly constructed anyway. I'm writing a book about that
Mm.
because I think it's all fundamentally wrong at the arithmetic level. I don't look upon numbers as fundamental at all. So I'm the sort of opposite of a Pythagorean who thought the universe is made of numbers. I think that they're derivative. But anyway, that's another subject for another day.
Yes.
And I'm expanding that book, and who knows if I'll ever finish it and publish it. But it's not for the general public anyway, so who cares? But I find it's a great sense of adventure. So a lot of people like to climb mountains and cross deserts. I like to read impossibly difficult books and remember it and put it together with the other ones. That's just my thing.
Yeah. That's a great thing. Yeah.
You
And
know, you got to do something.
so more about the clouds. Sentience. Have they tried to communicate with us? What
Yeah.
their
Well,
purpose?
yes, you're getting to the point now. So let's look at it like this. 99.99% of the universe is plasma. Therefore, I would say it's logical to conclude that 99.99% of the intelligent entities in the universe are made of plasma.
Mhm.
So our SETI program is skewed in the wrong direction. We're looking for people on rocky planets with some water who haven't beaten each other to death with their clubs or been gobbled up by dinosaurs. I mean, that's kind of a hard ask. So it's a lot easier to think in terms of the clouds being intelligent. And what if we tried to communicate with them? After all, they already know everything about us. They've got such computing power. They're billions of years old. They've been here for the whole history of the planet. They know the entire history of the Earth, the entire, if you can call it history, the pathetic few thousand years of what we call human history. They know all of that. They also read all of our emails. They also listen to all of our phone calls, but they can correlate it properly, unlike the Utah idiots. And so they know all about us, and when this goes out, they will see it. They may be watching now. There's no limit to what they can do. And I believe they have plasmic drones that they send to Earth the whole time to keep an eye on things. And that these are the glowing UFOs, you see,
Mm.
which do all those impossible things in the sky, which no living being could survive, a material one. But the thing is that they behave precisely as intelligent ball lightning, and I have a whole chapter in my book called Great Balls of Fire, which explains about ball lightning. Now, many books have been written about ball lightning, and I refer to all of those. And ball lightning can behave in an intelligent fashion. There's a recorded instance of somebody who saw a ball lightning ball examining uh, a Turkish carpet and
Mm.
following the design as if studying it. Well, that's intelligent behavior, and it's ball lightning doing that. They they're made of plasma, and I have taken the theory further and explained that they're not just plasma, they're plasma crystals. And I've given the evidence for that, and that's my original contribution to plasma physics. Not that the plasma scientists know that. And I also found that there was a chap who in 1989 had discovered that plasma manufactures its own dust. It can't just rely on picking up dust from space or that's floating around. They can make dust, and the process has been described. And I contacted him. His name's Gary Selwyn in America, and he discovered this while working for IBM. And the reason why IBM made this discovery is that you probably don't know that when they deposit these tiny chips into computers, they're too small for to be held by any mechanical device. They have to float them down in plasma onto the surface very carefully. And so they were meeting with a problem with dust getting in the way of the what they call the plasma deposition of their chips. And they had Gary try to figure out what was happening and how could they eliminate the dust problem. He was able to prove that the plasma was making its own dust.
Crazy.
So that's how you get a plasma cloud full of dust, which becomes intelligent, because if it doesn't have any handy dust to hand, it makes its own. This is a huge problem with the attempts to control nuclear fusion,
Hmm.
because for decades they've had what they call the dust problem in the reactors, trying to control fusion. And they were going around in white coats with nets on their hair to stop the dandruff and clean rooms and the whole lot. And they still had the dust, and it didn't make any difference because they thought it had to be dirt, contamination by dirt.
Yeah.
Dirt is the thing that most Americans are afraid of. Dirt, dirt, ugh, dirt. It's worse than germs.
Yeah.
Anyway, um, they had this dirt, you see. And what were they going to do about it? And so we now know that the plasma was making it its own dirt, and you can't get rid of it. This is also holding back nuclear fusion, of course. But if they did make something, it would be so full of dust it would become intelligent. So they think they can use that to make electricity. If they ever succeeded in making anything, it would be smarter than they are. What,
Sentient electricity.
what would they do? They'd be making a mini Kordylewski cloud on Earth? Not a good idea,
Yeah.
because it might decide to take over. A super AI entity, which we create on the surface of the Earth, take over the control of all the networks in no time. I'm just speculating. That's science fiction, but maybe it's not science fiction. But this is the situation with the sentience, that these are super intelligent entities. The sun is intelligent. The two clouds, the Kordylewski clouds, are minnows compared to the sun, which is like 100,000 times bigger than they are. You can imagine how intelligent the sun is. I mean, for the sun, the Kordylewski clouds, which are so huge from our point of view, are just a couple of little minions that the sun sends out to say, "Oh, you two guys stand over there by the earth and let me know what those stupid humans are getting up to, because you'll be
Little
closer."
lamp.
Yeah. And I do believe that they send plasma drones, and that that's what the glowing UFOs are.
The
Uh,
orbs.
hmm?
The
The,
orbs or the physical spacecraft.
no, no, the orbs.
Okay.
I don't know about the physical ones. There's still mysteries in that field, obviously.
Sure. Yeah.
But I think that the glowing orbs that go zigzag and all that, I think those are plasma drones because they have intelligence,
Mhm.
which means they either have intelligence in them so that they're like a computer program that's autonomous, like you send a drone out to bomb some country, or they're remotely controlled. Who knows? But there is intelligent control either from without or built into a program within. And when these giant blobs come from the sun with solar storms, they're programs and they're affecting the atmosphere and they're iterating the program and carrying out the instructions all the time. And so, that would be affecting weather and doing all sorts. We don't know what it's doing, but obviously having effect on human brains, especially selected human brains. You might think that they would be um, enhancing inspiration, for instance, in the good guys, assuming they're on the side of the good guys. And so um, we have to realize that we're looking for little green men far away in another galaxy. We've got intelligent alien life just above our atmosphere. They're called the Kordylewski Clouds. I do believe they tried to communicate with us, and then we haven't noticed or responded. Now, I didn't put that in my book. That's a whole thing I haven't published. I do. There is evidence, but that requires writing it out probably. But I do believe that they tried for a long time to get through to us, but it failed. Nobody would pay attention, and so I think they've effectively given up. Now, so this takes us a further step. I want to explain that I believe that we are all plasma entities, that you are, and you are, and I am, and that we are temporarily in physical bodies. Our plasma cells are larger than those bodies, but we squeeze in somehow. And I call our physical bodies smart overcoats. uh, because they've got all kinds of abilities to do things. I mean, we can walk and run, and we can lift weights and pick our noses. That's very important. Uh, and scratching our heads and the whole thing, which our plasma bodies can't do. So they're using the physical body to pick the nose,
Mhm.
which the plasma can't do. And so every cell in our body is full of plasma and full of electric charge. And Albert Szent-Györgyi, whom I knew, another Nobel laureate, who wrote a book in the 1960s called Biological Electronics. Um, he maintained that the body is completely full of semiconductors modulating the flows of the electric charge, and which a lot of which is superconducting and spiraling along the DNA strands and so on. Um, he believed that the body is an electronic body. Even our physical body is electronic. So, in other words, our plasma body is not by any means just separate from the physical body. It's embedded and enmeshed within it deeply at every level of every cell. And we're talking about nanometer-sized pockets of things happening, which are 1 billionth of a meter. That's small, and the the junctions, which are called Josephson junctions, after a guy called Josephson, whom I also knew, um, are like where a superconducting current meets a very thin barrier, but it jumps across it. That's called tunneling and gets into the next one. But it acts as a switch, and by this means, you can control the flow of superconducting electricity through the body and through the plasma body, um, to like orchestrating, conducting a symphony orchestra. I mean, it's really subtle and really fantastically flexible, and this is the way everything's working. And we're little miniature creatures, as above, so below. That we're working on this principle too, but of course, uh, the part of us that's made of atoms doesn't last very long. It tends to wear out, and it can get uh, smashed up in a car crash or whatever. And so, it's an unstable uh, kind of stratum to enmesh your plasma self into, but it's the best option we've got. It's very boring going through the 9 months in the womb and being a babbling infant for a couple of years, and then you begin to notice the outside world when you're 3, and then, but when you're a baby, you've got these big eyes looking at you, and you wonder, who are these people who keep going goo goo at me? Goo goo gaga. They must be crazy. But anyway, those are called parents, and and all the thing we have to go through to get into the world to grow up to the point where we can do anything. It's very important. And so we are plasma beings. And the point is that we survive what we call death, which is just the death of the physical body, but also we were there before. In other words, reincarnation is the absolutely fundamental principle of everything. And it has the consequence that you cannot die. No matter how hard you try, you can commit suicide 100 times, you will still exist. It doesn't work. And so, no, I'm not saying that suicide is unjustifiable for people in extremes. Like I had a friend who killed himself because he was dying of motor neuron disease. Well done. And if you're a sex slave of an Albanian gang or something and you can't escape, you could kill yourself. I mean, we shouldn't be judgmental about people who are driven to the extremes of suicide.
Sure.
And for instance, manic depressives kill themselves when they're down. They don't mean to, but they're not in the right mind when they do it. This is well known that they often kill themselves, but they only kill themselves when they're no longer in control of their reasoning faculties because they've gone so far down to the black hole. And this is a great tragedy. And we can't be condemning of anybody doing that, committing suicide. But what I'm saying is that you still exist. And a lot of people, when they die, they kind of float up above their bodies. We all know this now from all the NDEs, and they look down on their bodies, and they get a tremendous sense of euphoria because they think, "My God, yippee! I'm not dead after all. I'm still here. I don't know. That's the ceiling." But and it goes on like that. And then they enter what I call the other world, which is the plasma world, which is parallel with this world in a sense, and they revert to their normal state. We are normally plasma beings. We come down here. This is the oddity is to
Yeah.
be here.
Hmm.
It's the exception, and a lot of plasma beings haven't got the courage to do it. Um, but the whole point is that it's the plasma world is the other world, and it's full of dead people. Uh, Speaking from the Earth perspective.
Hmm.
Now, where are they? I've had just thousands and thousands and thousands of paranormal experiences to the point where I say, "Oh God, not another one." But the thing is, um, they're only of certain type. My main psychic ability is what I use in my work. I can penetrate what I call information space, and I can go into a library and sense where the book I need is and pull it off the shelf and open it to the right page because I'm like a bird going back to the nest where it was born in a migration pattern. I can go, I know where the information is. Otherwise, I couldn't do these huge research jobs that I do.
Yeah, yeah.
And I know which book to look in and which chapter to look in, and I feel it, I sense it, I know it. I know the information from penetrating information space, and so I find it,
Or
because I
which
know.
or which combination to put in a lock per se,
Yeah,
referring to a story that you
the
may.
story I told about my dog.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, you see, that was an example of course, it was an unnatural thing to do because I broke the rules.
Hmm.
But my dog was trapped, and I knew she couldn't survive if I didn't get her out of that room, which had a door code, because she couldn't survive until the next day.
Because she was diabetic, right?
Oh, she had a kidney problem.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, very serious. She was old by then. And we loved our dog very much. My wife was with me, and it was just a four-digit code, but how do you do that? And so I got into a state of extreme emotion, which I almost never do. And the number just popped into my head. I punched it in and opened the door, just like that, but effortlessly. You can rape information space on very extreme occasions, but you have to try never to do that because it's against nature. I did it to save my dog, and but if you try to harness that kind of ability, you'll have terrible things happen to you, I'm sure. But there is what I call information space where everything's available. That's because we're living in a solar system which has all the information all around us. I mean, we're surrounded in plasma, which is intelligent and which knows everything. All we have to do is we can't see it, we can't touch it, we can't smell it, but it is all around us. And if you learn how to penetrate information space in a gentlemanly fashion, not like with my opening the door,
Yeah.
um, and your intentions are good, you can get the information that you need. It's very exhausting. It takes a lot of energy, and it doesn't leave you a lot of time for other things. But so anyway, in my paranormal experiences, I've many times visited the other world in my sleep, uh, thousands of times, in fact. And I discovered to my surprise that many people do this. We're known as dream walkers to the dead people who are there. And they can instantly recognize us, but it took me a long while to figure out how they did it. You see, everybody in the other world is clothed. They might be wearing anything, but they've always got something on. Because this is all just sort of an image projected in the plasma, but they're always dressed in something. And dreamwalkers are naked.
Mm.
Well, they can spot us a mile away. Oh, here goes another dreamwalker. Let's have some fun. And what they do is they tease and taunt people, and sometimes they pretend to be demons and they frighten them and all this kind of stuff. It's just they're bored and they're trying to amuse themselves because they've got these idiot dreamwalkers turning up. But I mean, I've been there so many times, I sort of know how to handle all that, more or less. And and I do have a guide sometimes, who's a woman, and so I've met like tens of thousands of dead people. So here come the guys to take me away in the white coats. Here's somebody who says he's met tens of thousands of dead people. Put him in a bin, right? But it's true, and or at least I think it's true. I mean, maybe it's all a fantasy, but I don't imagine that I have the capacity to invent tens of thousands of completely different personalities. They're all different from each other.
Mhm.
So I've only been in this one part of the afterlife because it's like essentially divided into three. The bit that I visit is the in between space, which is a kind of glorified purgatory. You know, the Catholics have a purgatory.
Yeah.
Of course, it's the basic concept is there, but their detailed concept of it is all wrong. But they got that germ of a true thing there with it because there is an in between space where between 85 and 90% of people go automatically. because they're not really super good to go to the better place, and they're not irredeemably evil to go to the really, really bad place, which we call hell. It does exist, but they call it the pit. And there's no way out. It's a confinement space because you see, you can't annihilate bad people. All you can do is confine and isolate them. That's the technique used to deal with the ones who are just way beyond the pale.
Hmm.
Like mass murderers and
Sure.
uh, terrorists and those kind of people. Um, and but you can't visit it because you could not return.
Sure.
But it exists. And I was taken down by my guide to see, to look down, and I was allowed to see two people being consigned to the pit um, by the receivers. These giant sort of 8 to 10 foot tall spiritual automatons who do all the heavy lifting, for things like that, who consign people to the pit. Because you see, uh, a normal sentient person wouldn't be able to stand it because it's too horrible.
Hmm.
You're consigning people to hell all the time. That's too much for you. So they have these like automated beings who
Hmm.
they call the receivers, and they're huge, sort of giant guys. They're always guys, and like bouncers outside a nightclub, only steroids.
Yes.
And they're the ones who consign people to the pit, and they lie them down horizontally on a bed, bound, and they are wrapped around by a serpent, tightly round by a serpent with a head with huge jaws and sharp teeth, uh, looking at them and plasmically devouring them continuously without cease. This is just the start. This is before they even get there. And then there are, it's like when they raise the things to put you in an oven for, to incinerate a body, and,
Hmm.
but there's no oven. They raise the things, these guys are um, slid along, and then they go down the chute, which I mean, it's miles deep. I was allowed to look down the chute. It's never ending. I mean, you've never seen anything like it. It's miles deep. God knows how far it goes. But you can understand why nobody could get out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and so I was taken by my female guide. She wanted me to see this in order to tell people about it, that I was being shown this in order to communicate this to people.
Hmm.
Feel like that I wanted to, but she said that I must. She wants me to tell some of the things that I've been specifically shown. Now, she also took me to see in the middle part, which they call the gray regions, by the way. Um, there was we're walking along, we came to what was like a sort of endless city wall that we were passing on a walk on a great thoroughfare. And everybody goes by foot because, they don't get tired because they're not physical. So they have limitless energy, and they don't eat. Nobody eats or drinks or anything like that. And so there was this huge building on just right there. There's a gate in the wall and a huge building that looked very like the Blue Mosque in Istanbul. I said, "That looks like a mosque." And she said, "Oh yes, it is. We call it the Mosque of Entry." She said all the really devout Muslims insist on they have to stay together and they don't want to mix with anybody else. So, in order to make them feel at ease and at home, we've constructed this huge mosque of entry. So they go through the gate and they're in a mosque and they feel, oh, everything was true, we have our own heaven. And then they feel fine. And they're all Muslims in there together. They don't have to worry about unbelievers because there aren't any. And and they get on with being Muslims together. I don't know what they do in there. I don't think they would be able to find the direction of Mecca, for instance, but presumably they are willing to overlook that duty. And they go in there, but she said that we found it's impossible to get them to mix with other people. So they have to have their own separate district. And they go in through this giant mosque to show that, comfort them, and they realize that they're going into the Muslim heaven, and it is the Muslim heaven. So there you go, and
Interesting.
I hope they are happy there. That's that. She just wanted me to know that that existed and that I
Uh-huh.
could see it and report it. She doesn't go into an enormous amount of detail, and I'm never allowed to see her face. It's a total void, her face, because if I saw her face, I might recognize her, so that's not permitted. But she's like about early 30s, she's slender and dressed elegantly in a kind of robe thing. Uh, very impressive. But you're not allowed to see her face.
Fascinating.
Does
I
she have
don't,
a name?
no, no, no. No, she tends to stand behind my right shoulder
Mm.
most of the time. I only catch glimpses of her. And she guides me and speaks to me, but she doesn't ever call any attention to herself. She's always trying to basically conceal herself. Uh,
Wow. That's incredible.
so she's only my occasional guide. Most of the time, I'm on my own.
Hmm.
And so here's the strange thing about the gray regions. Um, it's under a dome. There's no sky.
Hmm.
There's no sun. There's no moon. There's no stars. There's no sky. There's no weather. There are no clouds. There's ambient light coming from the dome, which is even, doesn't vary. There's no
Hmm.
day or night. There's no weather. And there's no way to tell any time. There's no recurring phenomenon that you can use to measure time. So it's timeless in the sense that there's no way to measure or detect time. So it becomes as if it's timeless. That doesn't mean that time isn't really passing.
Hmm.
It just means that it's timeless in your experience because there's no day or night, there's nothing. It's always the same. And but there are like this place is so gigantic, it's full of billions of dead people. It, you know, and obviously, I've only visited very restricted portions of it, the English speaking and a bit of German speaking parts of it, and that's it. And you can speak any language, it's all telepathic,
Hmm.
but then people like to talk to each other in the languages which they knew on Earth. I've met with quite a lot of Germans there, and I discovered, to my surprise, even in my sleep, I realized this is something very odd. I can actually speak entirely fluent German,
Mm.
very high level, as if I was Heidegger or something, in very detailed conversations with these German intellectuals that I've met. Um, Perfect German. I mean, I
Wow.
can speak German, but not fluently. Good Lord. I could never carry out a philosophical conversation in German. But but when I'm asleep, I can. Weird.
Very weird.
But mostly I've been with English speaking people, and um, they're of all kinds, and there are very few children there are a tiny, tiny number of children that you sometimes see who manifest as children because they've died as children and they
Yeah.
still think they are.
Uh-huh.
Eventually, they change. Most of them tend to choose to look like they're in their 30s.
Hmm.
I'm sure you've read that in other accounts. That's quite commonly known that people do that because they think maybe that's when they look their best on Earth.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. The prime.
There are some diehards who refuse to make compromises and look like old people. They insist on remaining old people because
Hmm.
they don't want to cheat. They want to be authentic. You
Interesting.
do meet them, but not very often. And there are people who are desperate to come back to Earth, and they are in piles. We call them the hurlers because they want to hurl themselves back to Earth, and it's they're all sort of mad, really. And there's a lot of mental illness
Hmm.
in the other world. Obviously no physical illness, and if you were blind, you get your sight back. If you were deaf, you get your hearing back. If you lost your legs in Afghanistan, you get legs back. Everything's fixed in that way. But there's a great deal of mental illness. In very extreme cases, they do have counselors. And somebody who is very seriously mentally ill through no fault of their own and not a character flaw, but it just happened. They will spend years of Earth time trying to cure them, and they always succeed in the end. But that's only for a minority. They can't do that to everybody. And most of the mental illness is superficial, or it doesn't really interfere with anybody or anything. You get ranters, but most people are very subdued. And as you go down the levels, there's like a million levels. It gets darker and darker and darker as you go down because the light's coming from above, you see. Now, the people in the top levels think they're in heaven. They're having such a great time. They think that's the best it can get. But of course, there is a completely separate heaven. But they think they're in the heaven because it's so nice. And I was taken once to a city called Fun City, which I was told had a population of 2 million. And the inhabitants were entirely made of sports people, uh,
Right.
male and female. There's no sex up there, but there's gender is very important. So you've got very strong gender, male, female, but without genitalia and all that. There's nothing sexual, but it's gender is very, very, very fundamental. I don't know why, but it is. And so this fun city was full of sportsmen and sportswomen who on Earth had been sportsmen and sportswomen. And they all come together in this place. And they're pretty good people because most sportsmen and sportswomen are very nice, jolly sort of people. And they like being together. They're very groupified. And so they've got this place they can go where they don't have contact sports, obviously. You can't do boxing there, but they have these fantastic synchronized displays. Like the kind of thing that you get in a huge football auditorium where somebody's holding a sign. They hold all the signs up suddenly and it spells a
Mhm.
message. It's
Mhm.
that kind of thing the whole time, and they never tire of it. They're doing this all day, and they've got all kind of sports they've devised, which you don't have to be physical for, and they're just having the time of their lives. And they're not. But the thing is, I'll tell you a very funny peculiarity.
And then we have to go.
Oh,
We've reached our heart out, but please continue, finish your thought first.
well, sometimes I ask if I can go pee, and, and they actually have little empty rooms that they've built in the buildings they've constructed which are empty, of course. There's no toilet or no sink or anything, but through habit, they have the room, even though there's nothing there. And they show me to that room. Of course, that doesn't work, and so then I have to wake up and really go particularly. I mean, this, but out of habit, all the buildings do have empty toilet rooms with no toilet because it's habit. You see, they're still half earth thinking.
Yeah, we definitely need to go further down that line of thought. Did you have you written any books about your experiences in those realms?
Oh no, no,
Okay. Okay.
I haven't
Well,
written any.
if you would please honor us and return, we would love to talk more about that. And there's still a lot to talk about as far as the new science of heaven is concerned. We would love to have you back, but if you would agree to do that, that would be fantastic. In the meantime, if you could tell our listeners and the people watching where they can find you and your work.
Well, A New Science of Heaven, only the paperback is still available because the hardback sold out, and but there are still there's a paperback
Yes.
that you
Excellent.
can get it on Amazon easily. While they last, they'll eventually be gone as well. And there's no way to buy a hardback anywhere
Hmm.
because they've all been gobbled up. It's they did a reprint and that sold out, and but the publisher's not interested in this book. They're not. It's a big publishing house that's interested. They mostly do celebrity books and
Hmm.
uh, Meghan and Harry or something.
Uh,
Pardon me while I'm sick, but uh, you know what I mean.
yes.
They'll pay millions of pounds for a celebrity book because everybody buys it. I don't know why, but they don't have much interest left in real books anymore.
Mhm.
So there's no way I could persuade them to keep the book going because they're not interested in it.
Mhm.
Yes.
It was my editor who pushed it through and believed in it, but he retired, and that's it.
Uh, and you have a website that you can direct people to?
Oh, I have lots of websites. I've got one called robert-temple.com. Hyphen is the English word for dash, not underscore, dash,
Uh-huh.
robert-temple.com. That's a bit of this in it. There is website for the book, but I never got around to filling it with stuff because they were going to leave the footnotes out, and I was going to put them on the website. But it is newscienceofheaven.com
Okay.
does exist, but it just has like only a little bit on it because I didn't need to put the footnotes in there because at the last minute, as the book was going to press, I managed to slip the footnotes back in,
Oh,
which the
good.
publisher wanted to take out to save money on paper. So I
Gotcha.
did squeeze the footnotes in, so I didn't need the website for them. There's many, 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 many photos, 50 photos that were removed. But
Oh,
um, anyway, let's hope I can keep going for a bit longer. I'm getting a bit ancient now. Uh, so I don't know how much longer I'll be able to, but I'm still active working every day, all day,
yeah. Yeah.
on a couple of weekends. But, at some point, the good Lord will come for me.
And I want to talk about that, about if you ever experienced heaven.
Don't get
Uh,
them started.
no, no, I remember it, but I haven't been able to visit it because I've been told I have to go to the gray regions because it's my duty to know all about it and to meet all those people and see how it works because apparently I'm going to have some horrible job connected with that.
Interesting.
They say they're giving me a promotion. That's what you absolutely do not want in the other world. You do not want a promotion. Never, ever. It's the higher you get promoted, you have the most hideous responsibilities, and you don't
Mm.
want them. You really, believe me, never say yes but you can't refuse a promotion. That's the other thing. It's like the mafia. They say, ha, ha, you do this or else.
Exactly.
Well, I've been told I have to know all about the gray regions because I'm going to have to do something in connection with the gray regions. I don't know what, but I'm meant to you see, I work all day
Hmm.
and then I work all night preparing for my job when I get back there,
Mm.
whatever it is, it's going to be awful.
I
So,
really, really hope that you agree to come back on the show because we, again, have just scratched the surface, and I would love to delve into this topic more with you.
well, I'm glad you're interested.
Oh yeah, and the book.
Absolutely.
More in the book too. There's lots of areas to go into, but it was really wonderful meeting you, Robert. Thank you for agreeing to sit and have a chat with us. It was
Great,
very
great,
enjoyable.
great pleasure, Chris and Hunter. Yeah,
Yeah.
to meet you and you're so deeply interested in these subjects, and of course, the idea is to get this information out there.
Yes,
People know. And
absolutely.
so that's why I do a lot of podcasts because I want people to know about this. There's no monetary motive. I'm not going to earn anything from selling the remainder of the paperbacks. I
Mhm.
just want everybody to know the information, which took me years to compile.
And it
And
shows.
so thank you for helping in that.
Oh yeah, our pleasure, our honor.
Oh,
Robert, we'll let you know when this comes out. I'll send you the links and stuff, and then maybe we can set up another time to chat if you'd be down for that.
yeah, I love that.
I'd love
Thanks a lot, you two.
Yes.
Thank you.